The door was unlocked, the lights were on, dinner was on the stove, still warm, 2 plates set for 2, a glass of orange juice half drunk, sitting on the counter as if someone had just stepped away for a moment, as if they'd be right back. They never came back. On the morning of October 14th, 2009, the Mercer family, a father, a mother, and their 9-year-old daughter walked out of their home in Harlan County, Kentucky, and vanished. No note, no calls, no withdrawals from the bank, no bodies, no trace, as if the earth had simply opened up and swallowed them whole. What investigators found over the weeks and months that followed wasn't just disturbing, it was chilling in a way that defies easy explanation. It raised questions that to this day remain unanswered, and it changed forever the lives of everyone who loved them. This is the story of Thomas, Carol, and little Emma Mercer. And this is the story of what happened when 3 people disappeared without a trace and left behind a mystery that no one has ever been able to solve. Thomas Allen Mercer was 38 years old when he disappeared. He was the kind of man who remembered birthdays without being reminded, who kept a vegetable garden in the side yard, and who spent his Saturday mornings fixing neighbors' fences without being asked. He'd grown up in Harlan County himself, the youngest of 4 brothers, the son of a coal miner who'd worked the same seam for 30 years. Thomas had broken that mold, just barely. He'd gone to community college, studied business administration, and ended up running the parts department at an auto supply store in town. It wasn't glamorous work, but Thomas took pride in knowing his inventory cold, in being the person that mechanics from 3 counties over called when they couldn't find a part anywhere else. His wife, Carol Lynn Mercer, née Denton, was 35. She'd met Thomas at a 4th of July barbecue in 1997, when she was 23 and he was 26. And by her own account, she'd known within 20 minutes of meeting him that she would marry him. Carol worked part-time as a dental hygienist at a clinic in town, 3 days a week, and spent the rest of her time doing the 10,000 invisible things that hold a household and a family together. She was the one who organized the school fundraisers, the one who remembered to schedule Emma's checkups and dentist appointments and the annual eye exam, the one who kept a calendar on the refrigerator covered in color-coded stickers and handwritten notes in her small, neat handwriting. Emma Rose Mercer was 9 years old. She was in the 4th grade at Harlan Elementary. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and she was obsessed. Her teacher would later use that word, obsessed, with horses. She had 3 horse posters on her bedroom wall, a shelf of horse books, and she'd been taking riding lessons for 2 years at a stable 12 miles from town. She'd recently lost her 2 front teeth and had a gap-toothed smile that appeared in every photo her parents took of her. She liked macaroni and cheese. She was afraid of thunderstorms. She had a best friend named Lily, and the 2 of them talked on the phone every Sunday night. By every account from everyone who knew them, the Mercers were unremarkable in the best possible sense of that word. They were not wealthy. They were not troubled. They were not the kind of family about whom neighbors whispered. They went to church on Sunday mornings. Not every Sunday, but most. Thomas coached Emma's soccer team in the spring. Carol brought casseroles to neighbors who were sick. They argued sometimes, the way all couples do, about money mostly. Thomas wanted to fix up the house. Carol thought they should save, but nothing that rose to the level of concern for anyone who knew them. They were ordinary, and that ordinariness makes what happened to them all the more incomprehensible. The last time anyone in the wider community saw the Mercer family together was the afternoon of October 13th, 2009, the day before they vanished. Thomas stopped into the auto supply store where he worked, though it was his day off, to drop off some paperwork. His co-worker, Dale Hutchins, would later tell investigators that Thomas had seemed completely normal. He was cracking jokes, Dale said. He asked me if I'd watch the game. He was just Thomas. He was at the store for about 20 minutes. He mentioned that they were going to have Carol's brother over for dinner that evening. That brother, Dennis Denton, 42, confirmed that he had indeed gone to the Mercer house on the evening of October 13th. He arrived around 6:30, and he stayed until approximately 9:15. He described the evening as completely normal. They had pasta for dinner. Thomas and Dennis watched football in the living room afterward. Carol put Emma to bed around 8:30. When Dennis left, Carol walked him to the door. They hugged. She said, "Drive safe, the road's wet." Those were the last words Dennis Denton ever heard his sister say. He tried calling Carol the next evening when she didn't answer a text message. No answer. He called Thomas. No answer. He called again the following morning. Still nothing. By noon on October 15th, Dennis Denton drove to the Mercer house himself. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The front door of the Mercer home, a one-story, three-bedroom house on Ridgeline Road, about 4 miles outside of town, was unlocked. Not just unlocked, slightly ajar. Dennis Denton pushed it open and called out. No answer. He stepped inside. The lights in the kitchen were on. The television in the living room was on, tuned to a local channel, volume low. On the stove, a pot contained what appeared to be the remnants of macaroni and cheese, Emma's favorite, dried and crusted to the bottom, as if it had been left sitting for more than 24 hours. On the kitchen table, 2 plates had been laid out and then apparently not used. 2 glasses of juice, a box of crackers, open, with some crackers beside it. It looked, Dennis would later tell investigators, like someone had been in the middle of making lunch or a snack and simply walked away. In the master bedroom, the bed was unmade but appeared to have been slept in. Thomas's reading glasses were on the nightstand, next to a half-finished glass of water and the novel he'd been reading. Carol's purse was on the dresser. Her wallet was inside. Her driver's license was inside. Both of their cell phones, Thomas's and Carol's, were found in the house. Thomas's was on the kitchen counter. Carol's was in her purse. Emma's room was, by all accounts, exactly as a 9-year-old's room should look. Unmade bed, stuffed animals on the floor, a library book open on the desk, face down, as if she'd just stepped away from reading it. Her school backpack was by the door, packed for the next school day. Her shoes, her everyday sneakers, the ones she wore to school, were beside the backpack. The family's car, a 2004 Ford Explorer, dark blue, was in the driveway. Their dog, a 4-year-old beagle named Pepper, was locked in the laundry room, as the Mercers apparently always kept him when they had visitors or when Emma was at school. Pepper had not been fed since the previous day at least. He was frantic when Dennis found him. Dennis Denton called 911 at 12:47 p.m. on October 15, 2009. Harlan County Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes. Within 2 hours, the scene had been designated a potential crime scene. Within 4 hours, Kentucky State Police had been notified, and their Criminal Investigations Branch was en route. What the first investigators noted in their preliminary reports was exactly what Dennis Denton had already felt in his gut. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of violence, no broken glass, no overturned furniture, no blood, no evidence that anyone had forced their way into the house, and no evidence that the family had been forced out. The house didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like a normal home in the middle of a normal afternoon, whose occupants had simply ceased to exist. No note, no letter, no indication of any plan to leave, no indication of any reason to leave. What were 3 people on an ordinary October afternoon doing without their wallets, their phones, their car, their shoes, and where did they go? The Harlan County Sheriff's Office officially declared the Mercer family missing on October 15, 2009. Within 24 hours, the case had attracted the attention of the FBI's Louisville field office, which offered support and resources. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was notified regarding Emma. Missing persons bulletins went out across Kentucky and into neighboring states, Virginia, Tennessee, West Virginia. Search and rescue teams began combing the area around the Mercer home on October 16th. The terrain around Ridgeline Road is not forgiving. The land is hilly and heavily wooded, carved through by creek hollows and old mining roads. Teams worked the woods for 5 days. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the forested areas. Divers searched 2 ponds within a mile of the house. Nothing. Investigators simultaneously began building a picture of the family's movements in the days and weeks preceding the disappearance. They interviewed Thomas's colleagues at the auto supply store, Carol's co-workers at the dental clinic, Emma's teachers and classmates. They pulled phone records. They reviewed bank statements. They canvassed the neighbors on Ridgeline Road. What they found, in terms of the family's social and financial life, was almost studiedly ordinary. Thomas's last shift at the store had been October 10th. He'd been scheduled to return on October 15th, the day his disappearance was reported. Carol had worked her last shift at the dental clinic on October 9th. Emma had attended school on October 13th, the last school day before the long Columbus Day weekend, which in the Harlan County district included Monday the 13th as a holiday. The family had a Columbus Day weekend with no obligations. Bank records showed no unusual activity. The last ATM withdrawal was $60, made by Thomas on October 12th at a machine in town. There had been no large cash withdrawals, no liquidation of savings, no sudden movement of money. The mortgage on the house was current. The utility bills were current. There were no bounced checks, no notices of financial distress. There were no scheduled trips planned. Carol had a dental appointment of her own on October 19th. Emma had a riding lesson on October 17th. Thomas was supposed to give a ride to his neighbor, Phil Hatch, to a doctor's appointment on October the 22nd. These were the markers of a life with a future, a life with commitments, a life that had every intention of continuing into the days and weeks ahead. Investigators interviewed Dennis Denton extensively. He described the October 13th dinner in detail, answering every question patiently and consistently. He had no criminal record. He passed a polygraph examination. He submitted voluntarily to multiple interviews. By all accounts, he became one of the most tireless advocates for finding his sister's family, organizing search parties, maintaining a tip line, speaking to media. Investigators eventually concluded, to their evident frustration, that Dennis was simply a brother who had lost his sister and didn't know why. Among the neighbors interviewed was Phil Hatch, the man Thomas had agreed to drive to his doctor's appointment. Phil lived about a half-mile down Ridgeline Road. He told investigators something that would later receive significant attention. At approximately 11 p.m. on the night of October 13th, roughly 2 hours after Dennis Denton had left the Mercer house, Phil had let his own dog out into the yard and heard what he described as a vehicle on the road. He said it was moving slowly, not like someone driving to somewhere, he told investigators, like someone driving and looking for something. He couldn't say how many vehicles. He couldn't give a description. It was dark, and he hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Nobody else on Ridgeline Road reported hearing or seeing anything that night or the following day. One more detail from the initial investigation deserves note. In the Mercer home, investigators found that Emma's bedroom window, a standard double-hung window on the north side of the house, facing the backyard, had its lock in the open position. The window itself was shut and appeared undisturbed, but the lock was open. Carol Mercer's sister, Janet, would later say that Carol had been a stickler about locking all the windows in the house every night before bed, a habit going back to Carol's childhood in a neighborhood where break-ins were common. Janet said it would have been very unlike Carol to leave a window unlocked. Investigators noted the detail. They could not say with certainty whether it was significant. From the first days of the investigation, the theories about what had happened to the Mercer family proliferated. They fell broadly into three categories. The first was voluntary disappearance, the suggestion that the family had chosen, for reasons unknown, to leave their lives behind and start over somewhere else. Investigators took this theory seriously enough to examine it thoroughly, but the more they looked, the less it held up. Beyond the obvious absence of any financial preparation, any withdrawal of savings, any cashing out of assets, any arrangement for the future, there was the matter of the things left behind. Both cell phones, both wallets, the car, the shoes, even the most hasty voluntary departure typically involves at minimum a person's wallet and phone. People who walk away from their lives generally, at a practical minimum, take their identification and their money. The Mercer adults left theirs on a dresser and in a purse. There was also Emma. A 9-year-old child does not choose to disappear. A 9-year-old child who vanishes is either taken or someone who loved her chose to take her from her life. And there was nothing in any account from any person who knew Carol or Thomas Mercer that suggested either parent was capable of uprooting their daughter from her school, her friends, her horse lessons, her best friend Lily, from the only life she had known. Lily's mother would later tell a journalist that Lily, 9 years old herself when Emma disappeared, had waited every Sunday evening by the phone for months, waiting for Emma to call. The second theory was that the family had encountered someone dangerous, that something had happened on the night of October 13th, or in the early hours of October 14th, something that began in that house or near it, and that someone had removed them, forcibly, against their will. This theory was supported circumstantially by Phil Hatch's account of the slow-moving vehicle, by the unlocked window in Emma's room, by the absence of the family members themselves from a scene that showed no sign of voluntary departure. It was undermined, frustratingly, by the absence of any physical evidence of violence. No blood, not a drop, anywhere in the house, no signs of a struggle, no drag marks, no fibers, no foreign DNA, nothing that definitively placed anyone other than the Mercer family and their known visitors in that home. The crime scene technicians were meticulous. They found nothing that helped them. The third theory, which investigators pursued with particular focus, was that Thomas Mercer had known something he shouldn't have known, or had seen something he shouldn't have seen, and that someone had wanted him silenced. Harlan County in 2009 was not unfamiliar with crime. The county had a history of issues with prescription drug trafficking, and investigators explored whether Thomas might have stumbled into something connected to that world at the auto supply store, which legitimate drug distributors sometimes used as a front for parts acquisition. But this line of inquiry led nowhere concrete. Thomas had no known connections to any criminal enterprise. His finances showed nothing suspicious. His colleagues and friends gave no indication that he had ever expressed fear for his safety or mentioned anything troubling. And yet, there are those who have followed this case closely for years who point to one detail that has never been fully explained. In the months before the disappearance, Thomas had apparently become, in the words of his co-worker Dale Hutchins, a little distracted. Dale used that word carefully, not wanting to overstate it, but he said that Thomas had seemed to be thinking about something in a way that wasn't typical of him. He hadn't shared anything specific with Dale. He just seemed at times as if his mind was elsewhere. Whether this was connected to what happened to his family, or whether it was simply the ordinary preoccupation of a man working through some ordinary private trouble, is something no one can say with certainty. 17 days after the Mercer family disappeared, on November 1st, 2009, a hunter named Gary Crenshaw was moving through the wooded hills about 3 miles from the Mercer home when his dog alerted to something off a narrow logging road. What the dog had found was a sneaker, a child's sneaker, pink with white laces, size 3. The sneaker was wet, leaf-covered, partially buried under forest debris, as if it had been there for some time, or had been deliberately covered. Gary Crenshaw recognized immediately what it might mean and called the Harlan County Sheriff's Office. The sneaker was identified as belonging to Emma Mercer. Her riding instructor confirmed it matched Emma's description of a pair of sneakers she'd mentioned to her during a lesson in September. Carol's sister Janet identified the color and style as consistent with sneakers she'd seen Emma wearing. The sneaker was a single sneaker. Its pair was never found. Investigators flooded the area around the logging road. They searched for days. They found nothing else. No other clothing, no other personal items, no trace of the Mercer family beyond that single child's shoe. Alone in the autumn leaves 3 miles from the house where Emma had packed her school backpack and set it by the door, ready for the next day. The sneaker was taken to the FBI laboratory in Quantico for analysis. Investigators did not publicly release the full results of that analysis. What they did confirm in a carefully worded statement was that the sneaker was Emma's, and that its presence in the woods was consistent with the family's movements being directed away from the public road. That phrase, directed away from the public road, was noted widely by journalists covering the case. It implied agency, implied that someone had moved the family, or at minimum, that the family had moved in a direction that wasn't toward any main road or public place. 6 weeks later, on December 18, 2009, a second discovery was made. A fisherman working a stretch of the Cumberland River about 18 miles from Harlan found a wallet partially lodged between rocks at the water's edge. Inside, Thomas Mercer's driver's license, a Visa card in his name, a library card, and $43 in cash. Nothing was missing from the wallet in any detectable sense. The wallet itself was waterlogged, but otherwise intact. It had not been thrown into the river's current. It was too close to the bank for that. It appeared to have been placed or dropped at the water's edge. No other items belonging to Thomas Mercer, or to Carol or Emma, were ever found. The wallet raised more questions than it answered. How had Thomas's wallet traveled 18 miles from the house? Who had placed it at the water's edge? If someone had taken the family, why leave the wallet at all? If Thomas had been at that riverbank, what had happened there? If someone else had placed it there, were they trying to create a false trail, or had they simply disposed of it thoughtlessly? These questions have never been answered. The river in that stretch was searched. Divers went in. Nothing else was found. The Mercer case was never closed. It was classified officially as a missing persons case, which it technically remains to this day. The Kentucky State Police assigned a cold case detective to it in 2012. The FBI has never officially closed its involvement. The case has been featured on multiple true crime programs, in newspaper investigations, in podcasts. Tips have come in from across the country and occasionally from abroad. None of the tips have led to a resolution. Dennis Denton maintained a website dedicated to his sister's family for more than a decade. He offered a private reward, funded by himself and by donations from strangers, for information leading to the family's discovery. He has spoken publicly about the case many times, always with the same quiet insistence. Someone knows something. Someone always knows something. He has never wavered in his belief that his sister did not leave voluntarily, that something happened to her and to Thomas and to Emma against their will. In 2013, a man serving a prison sentence for an unrelated violent crime in Tennessee reportedly told another inmate that he knew what happened to those people in Harlan. The inmate passed the information to prison authorities. Investigators from Kentucky traveled to Tennessee to interview the man. After multiple interviews, investigators concluded that he did not possess first-hand knowledge of the Mercer case and had been, in the view of the investigators, fabricating a claim for reasons of his own, possibly to leverage a sentence reduction, possibly out of a desire for notoriety. No charges were brought in connection with his claims. The investigators returned to Kentucky with nothing new. In 2017, a woman in Ohio contacted the Harlan County Sheriff's Office to say that she believed her then recently deceased neighbor had been responsible for a disappearance in Kentucky based on things he had said in the years before his death. She described things he had told her that she found consistent with details of the Mercer case. Investigators again traveled to follow up the lead. The man in question had died of natural causes 6 months earlier. Investigators examined his property and his history. They found nothing that they felt rose to the level of evidence connecting him to the Mercer case. The case file was updated. Nothing changed. Phil Hatch, the neighbor who had heard the slow-moving vehicle, died of a heart attack in 2015. He had never altered or expanded his account. He had always said the same thing. A vehicle moving slowly. Late on the night of the 13th, he had always said that he did not know what it meant. He had always hoped someone would eventually figure it out. Emma Mercer, had she survived and lived a normal life, would be 24 years old today. Every investigation generates questions. In a successful investigation, the answers to those questions converge on an explanation. In this case, the questions have multiplied and deepened with time, and the answers have not come. Why were the phones left behind? If the family left voluntarily, why abandon both phones? If they were taken against their will, why would whoever took them not take the phones, which could have been used to track them, or at minimum destroy them? The phones were simply left, one on the kitchen counter, one in a purse, as if the leaving was hurried, or as if whoever left or was taken had no moment to think about their phones at all. Why were there no footprints? It had rained on the night of October 13th. The ground around the Mercer house was soft. When investigators arrived on October 15th, they found footprints in the yard, their own and Dennis Denton's, from his arrival that day. But beyond those, the yard showed only old, weathered impressions consistent with the family's normal movements. No fresh prints leading away from the house. No tire tracks on the soft verge of the driveway beyond what was consistent with the family's own vehicle and with Dennis's car from the night before. Where did they go? 3 people in a rural county in Kentucky on a rainy October night left their home without a car and without shoes, at least without Emma's shoes at minimum, and simply ceased to exist in any form that the world could locate. They were not at any hospital. They were not at any shelter. They were not picked up by any roadside camera or any witness. They made no call from any phone. They accessed no bank account. They crossed no border checkpoint. They registered at no motel. In the modern world, with all of its systems and surveillances and interconnections, 3 human beings vanished so completely that not a single credible sighting was ever confirmed in the months and years that followed. Was the unlocked window significant? This detail has bothered observers of the case for years. Was it simply a night when Carol, distracted or tired, forgot to lock Emma's window? Or was the window used as a point of entry or exit? Could Emma herself have unlocked it? For what reason? Could someone else have unlocked it from outside? As a first step in something that happened that night, investigators noted it. They never definitively explained it. What was Thomas thinking about in the weeks before? Dale Hutchins' observation that Thomas had seemed distracted, as if something was on his mind, is the closest the record comes to suggesting that whatever happened to the Mercer family might not have been entirely random. But Dale was careful not to overstate it. It might have meant nothing. It might have meant everything. And the sneaker, Emma's sneaker, alone in the autumn leaves 3 miles from home. How did it get there? Why only one? If Emma was there, walked through those woods, whether freely or not, where did she go from there? The logging road is not a road to anywhere. It leads deeper into the hills and eventually fades into unmarked terrain. If someone took Emma Mercer into those woods, what happened at the end of those woods? No one knows. No one has ever been able to say. There is a quality to cases like this one, cases of complete, unexplained disappearance that resist the closure that most human beings instinctively seek. We want to know what happened. We want a narrative with an ending. Even a terrible ending is, in some ways, more bearable than the open wound of not knowing. Ask any family that has gone through this. Ask Dennis Denton. The not knowing is its own kind of grief, its own kind of violence, one that doesn't diminish with time in the way that other griefs do, because it has no object, no moment of finality, nothing to push against or work through or leave behind. Investigators have not given up on this case. Cold case units review it periodically. DNA technology has advanced significantly since 2009, and the biological samples taken from the Mercer home have been reanalyzed more than once as techniques have improved. Nothing new has emerged from those reanalyses, but the technology continues to develop, and investigators have not ruled out the possibility that future advances might yield something. There are people in Harlan County who still talk about the Mercers, neighbors who remember seeing Carol at the grocery store, Thomas at the hardware store, Emma at the school carnival, people who have never quite gotten used to the fact that one day 3 people were simply here and the next day they weren't, and nobody has ever been able to explain why. At the Harlan Elementary School, a small memorial garden was planted in 2010 in a corner of the schoolyard. It has a stone bench and a plaque and a rose bush that blooms pink every spring. Teachers who were there in 2009 still mention Emma to their classes sometimes, not as a lesson, not as a cautionary tale, just as a child who sat in these classrooms, who laughed in these hallways, who had a gap-toothed smile and a passion for horses, who called her best friend every Sunday night, and who was, in all the ways that matter most, simply a 9-year-old girl. The case remains open. The family remains missing. The door on Ridgeline Road has long since been sold to new owners, repainted, rehung. The stove where Carol's macaroni and cheese dried in the pot has been replaced. The bedroom where Emma's stuffed animals lay on the floor has become a home office for a family who moved to Harlan from Lexington for a quieter life. The woods where Emma's sneaker was found are still there. The logging road is still there. The Cumberland River is still there, moving through its stones in the cold, regardless. Somewhere between those woods and that river, between that house and those hills, between October 13th and October 14th, 2009, something happened to Thomas Mercer and Carol Mercer and 9-year-old Emma Mercer. Something that has never been explained. Something that may never be explained. And until it is, if it ever is, we are left with what we always have left in cases like this one. We are left with the questions. We are left with the people who loved them. We are left with a dog named Pepper who was locked in a laundry room and came out frantic because he hadn't been fed, and with a best friend named Lily, who waited by the phone every Sunday for a call that never came. We are left with the image of a 9-year-old girl's pink sneaker in the autumn leaves, alone in the woods, its pair nowhere to be found. If you know anything about the disappearance of Thomas, Carol, and Emma Mercer, anything at all, the Harlan County Sheriff's Office tip line remains active. The case number is open. Someone, somewhere, knows something. They always do.